Hi, my name is Charmaine St. Germain. I am a Union Labor Relations Officer with UFCW Local 401. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Métis woman from Treaty 6 territory and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 4, and I reside in Edmonton, Alberta. I guess I can say that my union activism is in my blood. My father was a union representative with the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. And I really became involved with my union around 2008 when a friend of mine who sat on the Superstore Bargaining Committee really encouraged me to join and get more involved. My first experience with bargaining was a real eye opener for me, to experience how my employer really was at the bargaining table, which wasn't great. And then to see the union bargaining committee there in solidarity, fighting for a better workplace, for better health and safety and wages and benefits and dignity and respect, it just seemed to ignite the activism and activist in me. I really care for those people around me, the people that I work for and represent. And I'm not someone who would just stand around and watch someone get treated poorly. So it just made sense that I would become a shop steward in my workplace and help advocate for my coworkers, to help to give them a voice for when they needed it the most. So I started taking as many union courses, education courses through not only my local, but through the labor affiliates and community groups as well. And that led me to joining and chairing a variety of equity seeking committees and caucuses over the past 16 years, which includes the Human Rights, Equity and Diversity Committee with UFCW Canada. And I really enjoy meeting and learning, discussing diversity and equity issues with other UFCW members from across Canada. We have an opportunity to discuss and collaborate what we are doing with our locals, but also through our national office. And currently, I sit as the Women's Private Sector Co-Chair for the Alberta Federation of Labor. I am the Treasurer of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus with a federal NDP, and I sit as a Labor VP and a member of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus with Alberta NDP, as well as I'm part of my executive board with Local 401 as the recording secretary. And as I mentioned, I'm a labor relations officer and I oversee the diversity committee within our local that is run by members.
So I ran federally in 2019 and 2021 election for the NDP in Edmonton Manning. I felt it was important that Indigenous women or Indigenous woman of Métis descent put her name forth. Canadians were seeing a rise in the cost of food and housing. People were really getting concerned about how they were going to afford to live. And Indigenous issues are important to me. So, we have a government that promised to implement the 94 calls to action, and there's been very little movement in completing those actions. And as a nation, we were divided. We were in the middle of a pandemic. So in 2021, and people from diverse backgrounds were the ones being targeted the most, and were also generally impacted the most. I wanted to be a part of that change that needed to occur. I felt it was important to run and be a voice for those who needed it in my community. And I wanted to be a representative for Indigenous people and women at the highest level of government in this country, because I knew our rights were at risk, and they've always been at risk, and I felt I could make real change. So, I facilitate the Indigenous activism course that was created by UFCW Canada in collaboration with Indigenous communities. And I sometimes get asked why it's important for Indigenous women to run for government, at any level of government. And, my reply is that there needs to be representation in all levels, whether it's on your union's executive board, as union representatives, union presidents, VPs, on city councils, MLAs, MPs, and so on, because we as Indigenous people need to be included in the decision making. We need to be included on things that greatly impact our lives. We can't continue to let non-Indigenous people make those decisions for us and not include us at those important tables. Our workplaces are made up of so many people from different diverse backgrounds, and those members need to see people like themselves in decision-making positions, fighting to make lives better, fighting for equality and inclusion. by having elected Indigenous officials, helping the Indigenous communities by giving them a voice and, increases the ability to be heard. A federal election is happening soon, and my hope is that I see Indigenous people running for MP in their communities and that they are supported. We need more representation at those big tables so that we can create real change and that we can be heard. Things need to be improved in Indigenous communities across this country, and that's only going to happen when we see that representation in the House of Commons. I don't understand how in 2025 in a first world country that so many Indigenous communities don't have something simple like safe drinking water. And that is just a tip off the iceberg in terms of Indigenous communities and what their people need. I hope we have more Indigenous people that get out to vote. I'm seeing currently a lot of names popping up, which is amazing. And there's a lot of support happening, and we need to continue supporting those Indigenous candidates. I do know there is a mistrust, and it comes from a long line of lies and genocide and so on. So, that's why we need to see more of our people running for government, amplifying their voices and advocating for what their communities need. There needs to be more collaboration, more listening, and learning needs to occur by non-Indigenous people so that we can move forth and heal and feel that we belong at any table that's making decisions about us.